So recently G2 have left the RLCS, which means it's yet another org to leave Rocket League. And that brings me to what I want to talk about today, which is the lack of roster and org continuity, which has never been as bad as now, partially due to last season's format, of course, with the whole system where you never really had a guarantee of at least being in the main event next event, or being in the latter stages of qualifying. Yeah, every single team started in round one. And I should probably clarify what I mean when I say roster continuity or org continuity. So when I say a team or whatever maintains roster continuity, by that I mean the team kicks a maximum of one player during an RLCS season. By that I mean, the modern 1 year season. And maybe, let's say, one player during the off season. That's probably allowed too. And then the less you kick, the more continuity you have. But usually, I would say, kicking a maximum of one player during a season still maintains that threshold, or hits that threshold of a roster having continuity. And then for org continuity, I would say you maintain that by, first of all, the org staying, or staying around, I mean, which is also helped by staying in the same region, though not necessarily required. And then more importantly as well than, which region you are in, is making sure you keep at least one player. And then obviously the same thing as earlier, the more you keep, the more continuity you have, but keeping one player is, at that threshold of maintaining the continuation of an org. And if that sounds confusing, let me give you an example of, Moist when they had Vatira Rise and Joyo. After that season, if Moist had dropped their roster and picked up Nolly, apparently Jack, and Chronic that were going to NA, or playing in NA, that would have, to me, that would have been really, really weird, and it wouldn't quite have felt like that was Moist, so that, the org continuity wouldn't quite be there for me. And those two things, roster continuity and org continuity, to me, both contribute to identity. Generally, I feel like rosters offer more identity to orgs than orgs do to rosters. Generally, they also live in mutualism, which I believe is how that's pronounced. In other words, they both provide each other with a benefit. They provide each other with more of an identity. And identity, I think, is so important in sports and esports, allowing for a passionate, loyal fan base to continuously support and consume the esport, which obviously is good for the esport. And that begs the question then, are teams actually, slash orgs, lacking identity right now? Let's look at NA for our first example here, because I think NA is lacking in continuity, especially. And in terms of long-standing orgs, NA is actually pretty similar to EU, since they both have I say a fair amount. It's not actually a great amount, but NA has SSG, NRG, Shopify, whilst EU has Vitality and Oxygen, I guess. So NA has more there, but EU are actually making the majors with these teams, whereas NA is only doing so with SSG. But NA also has more longer standing orgs, I guess, because Oxygen hasn't been around that long, whilst Vitality has. And NA has Energy and SSG, which we know have been around for a really, really long time. But yeah, they haven't. SSG has, but Energy, Shopify haven't been making any majors. Whilst the EU, but both for the fairly long-standing orgs that I mentioned in Vitality and Oxygen, they have been making the majors, they have been making worlds. So I guess they're sort of equal in terms of long-standing orgs in that sense. But when you then look at the more, let's say, recent teams in North America, for example, Gen G, they're going to have a completely new roster, or maybe they'll still maintain one of their players, I think. But that they just also dropped that same player, which is a bit of a weird situation. But yeah, if Gen G have a completely new roster, there's definitely a lack of continuity there. SSG will have a completely new roster, so lack of team team continuity there and or continuity. You know, SSG are sticking around, but you know, if they don't have any of the same players, it doesn't quite feel like SSG. I think we can agree on that. And then, worst of all, Energy is trying to take the roster of their longtime rival in G2, which just feels very wrong as a viewer. As an example, it's like if Real Madrid, in football this is, European football, Real Madrid and FC Barcelona just switch players one season. Every single player, they just switch all of them. It would just feel so wrong, and it speaks to the lack of the identity in especially North America right now. Other teams in North America, Dignitas, when they moved to NA, they dropped their entire roster, partially due to a whole team disband, but they didn't continue with Jorius, Scrubkiller, or apparently Jack after that. They just moved to NA as well. So, considering they moved region and didn't maintain other players, I feel like ever since then, it's never really felt like the same Dignitas. And don't get me wrong, since then, I don't really think they've really been making any major roster changes other than Gyro coming in and out of the team, like subbing in and subbing out. Um, so since they were reintroduced in NA, I don't think there's been any problems, but I feel like their heart and soul was really taken out of Dignitas within the Rocket League sphere when they moved to NA and dropped their entire EU roster. And then a team that does have roster continuity, not org continuity, but roster continuities, is RMC. Previously known as Luminosity. Yeah, they don't really have an org right now, but at least the roster has continued to only kick one player per season, etc., etc. So, or less, which has been the case for them. But yeah, then going on to EU, which I think is a little bit better off because they've got huge orgs, more recent ones like Gentlemates and Carmine Corp sticking around. Obviously, BDS has left now, so that's unfortunate. But Vitality, long-standing org, and those three are probably the big ones that have the most support: Gentlemates, Vitality, and Carmine. And I think generally they have more support than some of the top orgs in North America, which is what Gen G. No longer G2 now. Energy, but Energy don't really have they haven't had a top team, though they might have one now. But again, they're lacking that org continuity with that whole roster changing and taking one of their rivals, their roster. But yeah, and then there's I guess within Vitality and the roster of BDS, there's continuity there with Monkey Moon and Exotic sticking together. Now on Vitality with Zen. Though a bit like the G2 Energy situation, seeing them on Vitality feels a bit weird. But they are also joining an already Vitality player. So, it is also to a degree just feels like a player transfer rather than, a whole team scoop. Which I think feels a lot weirder. And then also with Jobless, there's roster continuity there with Rezi and Oli teaming throughout the season, with starting with Joyo and then going over to Ixo, so that's also there. Though I don't know if they'll be sticking around for next season, but just wanted to add that in there as well. And then, yeah, moving on to OCE, they've got continuity with power, so that's good. Other than that, not so much, but to be fair, OCE only has two teams that they can bring to Majors and Worlds, so not too big of a deal. And then in South America, you got Furia and Complexity, which for them, I would say they've also struggled a little bit with their identity, considering they've moved regions, but like I said earlier, I don't think that's a huge deal. Yeah, I would generally say that, considering the lack of absurd roster switches that they have definitely maintained a lot of org continuity as rosters and orgs in South America. And in South America it has Team Secret as well, which is a big one too. And then Mina has Falcon, obviously, with Tier K. They've maintained Tier K for a very, very long time, so they have a fair amount of org continuity too. But basically, I wanted to compare the current states to, for example, Season 6, when in NA we had Rogue, Ghost, NRG, G2, EG, Cloud9, and SSG all at the same time. That's huge. That's way more than we have in NA right now in terms of identity and big orgs as well. All of them having a lot of identity, though, to be fair, I guess SSG were a bit new at the time. But yeah, all these teams as decals were bought a lot. Though I know they didn't come out yet in season 6, but they came out not that long after. And yeah, all these teams, whether they had then or very soon after, they had dedicated fan bases, right? And in that same season in EU, we had Complexity, Flipside Tactics, Team Dignitas, PSG, Vitality, Mouse Sports, and even Fnatic. And even the orgless team of Weedom Girls probably had more identity than most teams do in NA or EU either. To be fair, EU is just kind of carried by those by those French orgs that have so many supporters and such a huge fan base. So I had to preface that as well. And then, I make that example, and I get that, League Play definitely contributed to the team identity we used to have, and not everyone likes League Play, and I'm not even necessarily saying we need to get League Play back, but I do think we definitely need to find a way to get more identity in Rocket League again. How we do that, I don't know exactly, so unfortunately I've kind of ranted about an issue where I don't I don't give a possible solution, but maybe one day I will. But yeah, I feel like orgs complaining about the esports shop not selling is proof that we don't really have roster or org identity. And I get, all rosters that don't have orgs are not gonna, be selling any decals in the shop. Um, but yeah, and I also get that for the smaller RLCS orgs that, don't make lands, not having a dream hack, it definitely hurts their sales because they don't really have that LAN exposure that they would otherwise if they could attend a DreamHack whilst they're not making any majors. When I say smaller orgs, I just mean the ones that aren't making the LANs. They're not actually necessarily small at all, like NRG. And I guess also it doesn't help that the esports scene and Rocket League esports in general has somewhat declined as well. But I still feel like if we had more roster or org identity throughout the scene, especially in NA and even EU as well a little bit, then we would be a lot better off, I guess, and the esports shop would be selling a lot better, and everyone would be profiting a little bit more. But yeah, hey, I'm sure that there are people working behind the scenes trying to navigate the issues and fix some of them. But we'll just have to hope for the best. I know that the SSA situation really hasn't gotten any better at all. They still you can still play remotely from any region within SSA. Unfortunately, for next season, to my knowledge, that hasn't been fixed at all. That hasn't been changed, which is very unfortunate. But we'll have to hope for the best in future seasons. So yeah. Anyways, that has been me. Thank you all for watching. Please drop a like, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you later.